second round of our workshop. I hope you had a good, refreshing lunch or break. I welcome to see Sandra. Good that you're with us. Great to see you. So without further ado, I would like to kick it off. Now we need to do a bit an exercise on collective time management until 4 that we manage. Sandra, I think the purpose of the discussion now that you show us a little bit about what we can do in terms of communication activities. So over to you, and thanks that you could make it to join us. Okay. Sandra, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sandra Milev. I'm happy to be with you today just to guide you through the communication actions which we can do and achieve together. I will now share my screen. So you see my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. All fine.
Okay.
Maybe if others could switch off their camera in terms of helping us on the connectivity, that would be good. Thank you for your understanding. Sandra,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Okay, do I also switch off camera?
No, we would like to see you.
Okay, very good, excellent. I'm also happy to see you. So, as you know, Horizon Europe is kicking off. So we have defined some communication actions and to distinguish with dissemination and exploitation. So what are we doing with communication? We are basically informing. We are informing multiple audiences, including the media, the citizens, the public, and it's mostly one way. It's reaching out. It's demonstrating what are we doing, what are we funding, how are we tackling societal challenges. With dissemination, we are sharing the results. So this is on the second step, when the initiative or the projects already have something tangible to show, and we show the results. It's about circulation of knowledge and enabling the value of results to be potentially widely used, and it has to be the vital part of the initiative since the beginning. Dissemination, who will we be sharing our results with? And exploitation is about using the results further on. It's already reaching out to the market, commercialization, standardization, and using for policy making activities. Next. Okay, I'll just go to the slideshow. Better. Oh, you see it now?
We see it, yeah. Okay,
yeah, we just went through this. And what are our measures? What are our planned measures? So we need to define that they're appropriate to the scale of the initiative, have concrete actions, planned accordingly to the timeline, so we can communicate our outcomes and impact. We need to define our target group. What are the channels, the tools I will be presenting in a moment, and what is the function, what is the aim, and how do we contribute to this project or this initiative. We need to have a follow-up plan for uptaking of the results, for knowledge valorization, and for feedback to policy. Communication measures, I was just guiding you through, is to promote this initiative and strategically planned with our clear objectives, defining the main messages, the audience, the tools, and once we have some results and some tangible things to show, we communicate about them, and also with the media. Communication and versus dissemination, we already talked about this. Communication is sharing, informing, and dissemination is already using the results with stakeholders and enabling and uptaking the results. Exploitation, it's already a further step. It's actually using the results for policy making, for market outreach, and it's already the final step. What are our tools in DG R&I in the Commission? We have press releases when we are announcing something new and Commissioner is quoting. We have news alert. This is at the RTD level. Of course, social media, the most impactful tool these days. We have infographics, videos where something is very tangible and eye-catchy, success stories, articles, a new website, newsletter. Next slide. Our social media channels, I invite you to have a look at and follow us, and also provide content now when we are kicking off and once we have something to say. And after establishing the new website, we will be communicating on social media. Those are our corporate account of our director general. And we are also present on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And of course, YouTube. Website, we will start with the basic website very soon together with you. We will be focusing on content, like basically what is this new initiative about, what are we trying to achieve, what are we funding, and why. So first, addressing the basic questions, and further on, developing a bit more interactive website where the stakeholders can be posting the regular updates, relevant webinars, online events, and like using it also for matchmaking, finding partners. We will be discussing that in parallel. So online events, whenever you have, please share it with Dominique and me so we can promote them on our social media, on our events calendar. Success stories are mostly on projects, our articles on projects. Horizon Magazine as well is projects and broader policy. We're trying to reach out to citizens. So this is written in a lay language. It's also targeting the parliament and representations in the member states. We have Futuries. We have a contract with the Futuries for videos on Euronews. As I mentioned, news alert when we are launching something new, something big. This needs to be agreed with our cabinet, and we have internal communication within the Commission. So this is from my part. I will now stop and wait if there are any questions. And I again invite you to follow us on social media and also reach out to me and Dominique whenever you have something new, something you would like to share with our audiences. And these are our accounts, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you very much. It was very straight to the point. I think the basic message which is coming, we want on Circularity Hubs to be very concrete. So we would like after this workshop also a bit roll out and engage with different participants. And I think the big message I would like to add to what you were saying, actually, we have a whole variety of communication tools actually in place to communicate. We are not a silent institution here in Brussels. We can do quite a lot on successful projects and on interaction. So that's the main message why I wanted to share this with you. Yeah, because we want to become operational after this workshop with many participants. Thanks a lot, Sandra. It was very good, very clear. Thanks a lot for your help. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sandra, we move now on to something different. This is technology, data transfer, IPR management. So I'm happy to welcome Dennis. Dennis Dambois, are you with us? I see you. Okay, good to see you. Okay, Dennis, you are a good colleague. You seem to be a big expert on IPR. So we hand over to you this issue about technology transfer and IPR and under this concept of circularity hubs, because it could be of great practical relevance. So over to you, Dennis. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would disagree that this is about something different. Actually, what was said about dissemination and exploitation is an excellent introduction for this session, because intellectual property issues are really at the heart of dissemination and especially the exploitation of any research results, whether it is about inventions, software, data, etc. All of that is potentially intellectual property. Now, whether this intellectual property needs to be protected, that is another issue. But in the first place, it is intellectual property. And potentially it has value. And so there is a need to manage it in a proper way. This is what we are going to discuss in this short session. Before introducing the three panelists, let me say very briefly that circularity is certainly an issue where IP management matters, to the extent that in this circularity context, many players need to collaborate along the value chain. And collaborating is not just about jointly processing materials, for example, it is also about sharing and exchanging knowledge, data, know-how, etc., whether it is on the processes, on the byproducts, and other items. So there are indeed a number of issues, IP issues, to be considered and organized, preferably before a project starts. And of course, this requires these IP issues to be reasonably well understood by all partners in the project and to be managed at a strategic level. This is not something to be left to some lawyers and to be addressed at the end of the project. No, this is to be addressed and defined upfront so that there is full clarity about these issues. But okay, let's not wait too much. Let me introduce very briefly the three distinguished panelists for this discussion. First, Dorota Pavluka. She holds an MBA with focus on R&I collaborations and change management. She's the Alliance Manager at Covestro, the chair of the working group Industrial Urban Symbiosis, and also of the task force H4C, as well as a member of the Change Task Force of the SPIRE Public-Private Partnership, now relabeled P for Planet. Second, we have Cleona Howie. She's the head of Circular Economy Development and Transition for the Climate Kick of the EIT. She has been working on the circular transition for over 20 years and currently develops large-scale demonstrations on the circular economy, working closely with public authorities and other stakeholders. And then third, we will have Alexandre Bredimas. He's the CEO of the startup studio Strane, with the objective of creating deep tech startups that improve society and the environment. He has been active in circular economy for more than 6 years. He's also leading the startup Seitis, which develops industrial synergies. And previously, he worked in lobbying and strategic consulting. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to their respective presentations. And dear panelists, please respect this timing of 5 minutes maximum per person. Otherwise, we are going to run into trouble with the timing. So now I'm indeed giving the floor to the first speaker, to the first panelist, who did I say? Sorry, I lost my list of participants.
Dorota Pavluka.
So Dorota, you have the floor now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. A lot. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm here today to speak from a little bit different perspective than it was mentioned before, from the perspective of a company. In this case, it is Covestro. Maybe if we need to hurry up, I would rush a little bit through the slides. Please give me the first slide. So Covestro, for those who don't know us, it is a global polymer producer. We have 16,000 employees, 33 production sites, and are producing plastics, high-performance plastics for a variety of different sectors, different manufacturers. So what I would like to emphasize here, what is relevant, we are very much concentrated on innovation and on circularity. We have more than 1,000 people working for innovation, and 80% of our projects are directed into sustainability. So next slide, please. So what is relevant for our Hubs for Circularity? We are very enthusiastic about this, of course. We are embracing two concepts of circularity, which are parts of it. First one is the circularity, which is our guiding principle. We have a program for the company to become fully circular, and it's a strategic program that is implemented now, and it comprises using of alternative resources, specifically developing recycling technologies and chemical recycling technologies, and also CO2 use for the production of plastics. And maybe mentioning here, we are building also value chains and going into close collaborations along the new value chains and new business models, which, of course, what mentioned today maybe will change the supply and demand relationship very much as soon as waste will become a valuable resource really that can be implemented. The second concept that belongs to, not yet, please. Second concept that belongs to Hubs for Circularity is the connection of plants within industrial parks. And here I would like to emphasize that we are we are integrated into industrial parks that already work traditionally according to the principles of industrial symbiosis and sector coupling. Thank you. Next slide, please. So now, what are the challenges connected to the industrial-urban symbiosis and circular economy? Of course, if it comes to connected systems, it needs to become the whole system, and the win-win situation to be visible needs to be a little bit transparent, so that if the whole system is winning, so that both participants are also winning, which requires, of course, exchange of information and exchange of data, which is a challenge. It is a common development of technologies which requires IP and knowledge management. It is about having partners looking into the common practice, product know-how, and processes, even if they are not protected by patents. So this requires trustful collaboration. And there is always a tension between alignment of a system into one system and a kind of difficulty of influencing the markets down on upstreams. So what we are doing for this is, of course, what Dennis already mentioned, from the very beginning, look strategically and very, very closely look into which kind of partnerships we are going to avoid competition. This is already a start of the knowledge management. Next slide, please. So if we are talking about transparency in connected systems and to balance profitability, this is a very nice concept, but two different kinds of problems arise, or maybe challenges arise, as not problems, are challenges to be overcome. First is IPR, as I mentioned, and process and product know-how. Even if we are going into strategic collaboration, what happens if one of the partners changes the strategy in between? So, and all of a sudden becomes a competitor. So this can become a difficult situation if long-term collaborations, long-term connections are going to be implemented. So another issue would be, what if in the system, the IPR is distributed in a way that the administrative hurdles are higher than really the remuneration for the different partners, how to deal with this. So next issue is, and this is what we experienced in the COPRO project, which was, by the way, coordinated by TU Dortmund, the group of Professor Engel, we had a situation when exchange about prices or about production volumes became a problem from the perspective of the compliance law, or where even if partners did not exchange it directly, the information, it was fed into the system that influenced, balanced the whole situation in the system and influenced the market. So it was regarded as a kind of gray zone, and that needs to be very closely examined in each case individually. This is the last slide, so I hope so. So what is the question? So one could see from a different perspective, and it was in fact the target of this panel to see how can we can from the legal framework try to be more inviting into such collaboration in case of industries that always need to very closely protect themselves, because it can be vital in the collaboration, even if they are excited to be part of collaborations, they still need to, in daily business, observe how to survive and not to endanger the business. Yeah, that's it. So there would be a lot of wish to become freedom from on the part of the contract, but the clue that I would like to emphasize with two last sentence is connected with our with the hubs and connected with facilitation and coordination, which can be on the technological level. This is what we had in COPRO. The Dortmund group developed, for example, technology where partners can exchange information or feed up information to one system without getting into direct exchange to each other. And then another thing would be non-technological, the same principle on the human, so to say, level, where our facilitators that were mentioned many times today come into place and facilitate between different industries in issues that are confidential. Thank you very much. This is
Okay.
Okay.
Many thanks, Rota. That was a good opening to our further debate. And without further delay, I'm now giving the floor to Cleona for 5 minutes, please. Please 5, no more than 5 if possible. Thank you.
So last.
Cleona, you have the floor.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
We cannot unmute. I don't know if somebody.
I can now. I did now.
Okay,
It was not. It was not working. I beg your pardon.
Okay. Sorry.
Please let me share my slides. Can you see my slides? Can you confirm?
Yes, indeed. You can put them full screen, and it will be perfect.
Okay. Is that full screen now?
Yes, although we see the little next slide on the right, but although this is not a big issue.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll say like this. So as we're here today, thank you for inviting me. I'm Cleona Howie from Climate Kick. From the morning session, we understand that European process industry is one of the main pillars of our economy, but things need to change, and industrial symbiosis is one of the ways to make that change, with reduction on and efficiency on energy and resource use, carbon emissions, knowing that the process industry is very resource intensive. Climate Kick works. Why are we interested? Why do we work on this? We work on this because we're interested in systems innovation, developing large-scale transformation, which is the same concept and ambition of the hubs for circularity, and to doing this at scale, so at place-based ecosystem scale. And obviously, Climate Kick is interested in linking this to climate impact. which is what we're all aiming towards inside this community. Today, I'm here to talk about the technology transfer and IPR issues, but I wanted to relate it back to an industrial symbiosis project called Scalar, which is about scaling European resources with industrial symbiosis. Giving you an understanding what this project set out to do, and the speaker after me, Alexandra, will also be talking a little bit about the results from Scalar, was to identify what is the missing potential in Europe that we are not delivering on with industrial symbiosis. So we know what industrial symbiosis is. We're very aware of technology and the key enabling technologies. We're aware of what we're trying to achieve, but why are we not achieving the full potential? And can we actually even understand what that full potential is and how, of course, that links to climate impact? So this is what the Scalar project set out to do. The Scalar project was very clear on saying to understand industrial symbiosis potential, we want to look at it from a systems point of view. So not just knowledge management, technology transfer, and IPR issues, but across the board of what are all these cross-cutting levers of change that trigger industrial symbiosis that lead us then to understanding the technology transfer and IPR issues. And that is our finance, skills, policy, how the production systems themselves are managed and function inside an ecosystem or an industrial park, the technologies associated to them, which I mentioned, what new business models are needed, and, and I can't see it actually because it's covered, but these are the systems elements that are needed to be able to trigger proper and full-blown industrial symbiosis. What did we learn from Scalar project on knowledge information transfer and IPR? We've already heard a bit from Dorota, but ICT tools are fundamental in facilitating, right? They support the exchange of information and they help us realize those synergies where industrial symbiosis could be initiated and activated and allow us to facilitate better synergies and more potential synergies at scale. This is across a temporal, spatial, social distance between knowledge workers, between consortia, between industry players, and inside those partnerships that are built to be able to activate industrial symbiosis. It obviously also contributes to reduction of costs when we talk about those facilitating those transactions, organization, operational issues. Looking at IPR, we know that knowledge is fundamental, so we have to use those ICT tools to facilitate this. Stands out of an analysis as a critical development factor and an indication. I'm just going to switch here. I think I can do this like this. And an indication of change as a knowledge base. But IPR is also viewed as a protection around companies' assets and competitive performance and competitive advantage. So why is it not shared? Why is IPR seen as a barrier? Dorota touched on some of these already, but there's some unwillingness and inability to be able to fully open source activate knowledge share. There's a lack of trust. That is also linked to legal frameworks, which Dorota mentioned, and how can legal frameworks change that lack of trust? There's a confidentiality, meaning if strategies change and company ambitions change, how do you maintain that confidentiality? There's motivational issues related, for example, to the financial system and financial framework, meaning where are the economic incentives to be able to open up knowledge transfer and share? This is linked obviously to market conditions, so carbon tax, for example, etc. There's also unwillingness due to partner competitive reactions, meaning if we're opening up ourselves, is there a vulnerability there that actually repositions the way our partners and competitors see us? Of course, there's existing regulations that are not fully facilitating. There's a lack of legal framework around contacts and relationships. There's even lack of knowledge about how these new partnerships and collaborations need to be formed and how to initiate them. And finally, just a basic understanding. So how do we enable this change, and how do we promote new kinds of technology transfer and release the tension around IPR issues? Dorota mentioned, please.
1 minute, please.
Thank you. Dorota mentioned the need for a third-party facilitator. I would also say that in our research in Scalar, we identified this, and this contributes to a definition of a strategy across collaborations for knowledge share and IPR issues. I've already mentioned incentives and legal frameworks and financial frameworks. This contributes to managing security and supply chain relationships. I'll just share with you, as time is very short, that the Scalar project is finished. You can look into all this kind of research and outputs that we have collaborated on and consolidated are available online. So you can find out more information if you're interested to dig deeper into what I'm presenting today. There's a series of quick guides and guidelines around these issues. So please do check it out online, even though the project has actually finished. Thank you, and I pass over back to you, Dennis.
Okay, many thanks, Cleona. I really liked this presentation of the barriers, and this is certainly food for thought for the debate we will have after. Now, the third presentation, and I'm immediately giving the floor to Alexandre for 5 minutes. I'm very sorry that I need to press you a little bit about the timing, but well, we have these constraints that you can certainly understand. So, Alexandre, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. I started to share, but I don't have the video. I don't, yes, just 1 moment.
We see your slides, not in full screen, but we see them.
Okay, yeah. So can you, is the video on, yes?
Yes, we see your slides, but maybe you can put them in full screen.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent.
Yes, thank you very much. So, as a background for us, so Strain is a startup studio. It's a company which creates startups. It's a bit weird, but it's real. And we participate in European projects to exploit the output. So basically, if we can succeed in valorizing the outputs with startups, then when the project is ending, we will create another economic activity and new jobs and create a long-term impact. So we participated in 2 projects at least. So we have more ongoing, but at least 2 which were in the past very important for us, which are H4C and Scalar. And in these 2 projects, we have supervised a PhD study on innovative business models. So here, basically, if a waste has no value and a cost for treating, how we can make a novel business model which would internalize some externalities. We assessed the market for industrial symbiosis because it's good to know about industrial symbiosis, but how much at the end, how much impact, what is the real potential in quantified terms. And we elaborated the exploitation strategy so we could touch upon the discussions between industrial and academic partners. And also we created one startup, which is called CETIS. So this startup is studying, so finding synergies, and then we operate. So we operate trucks and treatment to make the synergies between client companies. And I come back on this. But this is actually what we promised. So we had a startup to continue after the 2 projects. So on the potential for industrial symbiosis, we made a quantification. I refer to the Scalar deliverable number 3.5, which is an extensive evaluation. But in general, yes, we had a sample of synergies. It's huge. It creates new direct, indirect jobs. It creates billions of added value, CO2 savings, waste cost savings. So really huge. And it was just for a set of 38 synergies. We also mapped the facilities because it's good also to talk about industrial symbiosis in Europe, but actually when we look, we have some hotspots which we can see here, where the density, for instance, in terms of number of facilities in a radius of 100 kilometers is higher. And actually the Benelux region is very specific because there is a lot of facilities and a very diversified industry. So a set of industrial sectors. So why would companies go for industrial symbiosis. I think it was touched upon by the other speakers, so I won't go into the details, but there is a motivation with the supply of resources in order to diversify, improve industrial performance, reduce pollution, and regulatory constraints, which could be a motivation, but also a barrier. And the barriers were set, so interdependence, the variable quality of inputs, cost and investment required, and the security of supply. So what we learn from the field, a lot is ongoing at the early stage, really before we set up a synergy. Because when we come, we have a waste. Yes, great, but what's the true potential of this waste? And what is this waste actually? So sometimes we even don't know what is the composition of the waste in exact terms. So the first thing is really knowing the waste. Then finding a matching sector is terrible because you need to see which other industry would be willing to get it. So in which process, not just glass making, but really the specific process in glass making. And on the right-hand side, you can see here a number of synergies. So it's what the solution from CETIS, we are able to find this type of matchings. And it's something where usually you have a lot of correspondences of a matching possible. So usually here there is a clear bottleneck. Then can we do it regulatorily? Usually there is some uncertainty. Once we have this, we need to call the different industries, find the technical setup, qualify the supply chain suppliers, and usually we need to find local suppliers. So it all depends on where the industries are located, on the local suppliers. Once we have this, we start to know about the cost and price, and we can know the business case. And actually, during this process, a lot of knowledge is tacit. So the corporate strategy of a company is different. The decision makers may have different opinions. They may have industrial secrets. Sorry. So it's something which is there is a lot ongoing underwater. It's like an iceberg. So usually we cannot copy past a previous synergy. It's very difficult. So we know the business case at the end. So then the companies, from our experience, they are willing to share. Actually, they are willing to share data and to innovate. There is a real move that we can see for sustainability and innovation, but they will share it only if there is a business case. And we start to have a chicken and egg issue because unless there is a tangible sign, a positive sign, then they won't give it. And if they will give the data, they will want to give it to somebody who is knowledgeable and able to realize it concretely. So the ideas for discussions here is just really quick. So setting up a new synergy is a business on their own. So we ask usually to industrial companies to create industrial symbiosis, great, but their core business is to produce cement, to produce steel, not to make synergies and to valorize the waste. It's a side business. So it can be a business on its own, and intermediaries are really important, especially because there is a lot of tacit knowledge. I will finish very quickly. And being an early industrial innovator should limit the risk and bring a clear benefit. So, of course, there would be funding, a regulatory frame, but also, for instance, in terms of IPR, if an industrial company has been taking a risk to test a new technology, it should get a lower fee. It's just normal. The replication does not require confidential data. It's something where we probably there is something where clarity is required. We don't need a super confidential data because anyway a copy paste will be difficult. But we could need a minimum of data, and especially an inventory of what has been done and where, and an ontology of resources, which is something very difficult. So replication can be supported, especially in the early stage. And with fast tracks, for instance, of end-of-waste procedure. So if we know that a synergy has been done, then it should be easier to copycat later on. And we could see that the industrial symbiosis potential is of European interest. So it's really a policy that should be handled at EU level. But then we should make the best of regional specialization. And thank you very much for your attention. And I stop.
Okay, many thanks, Alexandre. I think that these three presentations were really complementary and paved the way certainly for good debate. It will be maybe a bit shorter than expected due to the timing, and I count on the organizers to tell us exactly what time frame we have. But now I would certainly invite all of the audience, all of the participants, if they have questions, to express them by using the chat function so that we can share them with the panelists and then hopefully they will give us our views. Otherwise, certainly I have a number of questions that I might also have, but I would like to leave that to the audience in the first stage. And I think that a very easy conclusion that we can draw, but that is absolutely not a surprise, is that yes, of course, any collaboration implies some exchanges of knowledge, of technologies, of data, and that is to say of intellectual property. And so again, as I mentioned initially, this has to be properly managed based on the willingness of the participants and on their basic, at least, understanding of IP mechanisms. Okay, do we have now any questions? Okay, we still have 10 minutes, I saw. That is not long, but at least this gives us time for a few questions. Here I see a question. How do you see the relation between the intermediate partner with the existing waste management sector? Is there a conflict? I don't know if any of the panelists has an opinion on that question.
Maybe if you want, I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's a very good question. So of course there are utilities which exist at the moment, and this is their core business to take the waste and manage them. But industrial symbiosis is a little bit more. So it's really on the recycling. So it's not in conflict. Let's say it's complementary because there will be a move which will be done anyway by everybody to valorize the waste. But here it's really a matter of innovation. So do you innovate and set up the synergies or not? So usually, the true reality is that when we look for suppliers, for instance, on our side, we subcontract work to existing companies which are specialized in the recycling of specific material. So it happens very often that the people on the waste management cooperate together.
Okay, thank you very much for this contribution. I don't know if other panelists have an opinion. Otherwise,
Maybe, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I could add to this from the perspective of, so to say, user of potential valuable waste, so to say. I think the collaboration should be on the demand side as well, because for the industrial companies, specifically for chemical companies, to be able to use some specific waste, it's very important to specify very clearly which kind of waste with what component can be used for the process that you need. So to be able to deal with the waste, it's of advantage to know what to look into first. So to say, what are the waste streams of most interest that can be taken up by the technologies that are existing already, and how to track them and how to get them out from the waste stream, so to say. So it's along the value chain.
Okay, thank you. Now there is another question. I'm reading it out. How to deal with existing structures? In many cases, non-transparency allows for larger margins, and it is not in the economic interest of stakeholders to share information. Well, I would, my own personal view is that indeed this is to be assessed, of course, what you can win and what is the cost. But again, for me, any collaboration implies the sharing of information. But okay, now I'm giving the floor again to the panelists to express their views, which are probably better qualified than mine in that sector. Cleona cannot unmute again. I don't know if anybody can address that, or I don't know if I can do that.
Frank, can you help?
I've unmuted now. Someone's unmuted me. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Someone hasn't done it for me.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
And maybe
so, Fiona, you wanted to say something? Or?
I actually wanted to come in on the last question, if that's okay, because I think it's a very good question from Carl. In my experience, I have seen conflicts with existing waste management, where existing waste management is not based on industrial symbiosis at all. It's based on a financial model that is about waste management instead of waste optimization and valorization. So there are existing conflicts. That does not mean that the new potential and new opportunities are not there. They are, and that's what we're working towards. And when we talk about a system shift, but there are conflicts I've seen from existing waste management authorities, from existing waste management facilities, and certainly third-party waste managers who have based their business model around the old system. I think that this is part of policy change, the incentives we talked about as an enabler for that, and where this has to change to be able to drive the shift and create new opportunities so that the conflict is dissolved. But thank you for that. We can move on to the next question.
Okay, but I think that Alexandre maybe wanted to make a comment. I don't know if it was also on the previous question.
No, I was addressing so there are other questions which I think are very interesting.
Yes, yes.
On the one you read on the economic interest, on the companies, actually, when you come and you say to them, okay, your waste, how much do you pay for your waste? And I can find you another synergy, which maybe would cost you less. Of course, they will want to share a little bit of information. And if you go to a company with the same pitch on the alternative raw materials, they will support it. So they have an interest. The ones who are a bit less, have a less interest is waste management, actually, because here it's an established business, and sharing the data on what is done actually with the waste is a bit more sensitive, of course. But still, there is an added value because the policy is pressing to limit the disposal, and they will be forced to find also solutions.
Okay. Unless there is another comment, let's move maybe to the next question because time again is pressing, I'm afraid. So next question, I'm reading it out. There are many types of circular hubs. Some hubs are managed in a park-like manner. Others are more business networks. What are the IPR experiences from these two different setups? Is there best IP practice for different types of CE hubs? Any comments from the panelists?
I can go if you want, but I don't want to just talk.
Go as you are there on the screen. Go.
No, but I think we had experience in managing, for instance, a park in the eastern France where they were setting up this network of businesses. So it's an industrial park where there are many large companies, so petrochemical and biotechs, which are located at the same place, but they are absolutely not cooperating. So the first thing was, what can we do together? And actually, indeed, it's at this stage, it's difficult to share the IP and data, and they look for solutions of joint interest. So you can find there things which are not at the level of something which requires IPR, like joint purchasing, for instance. And then they start little by little to go and set up equipment. And at this stage, so we have also experience in companies so in parks, which are run at this stage of maturity. And at this stage, yes, they start to develop joint projects and joint R&D projects. And when they come to this level of cooperation, usually it's easy and natural to share the IP and the investment. I think you are muted, Denis.
Thank you, I was muted, thank you. And let's take another question, which maybe will be the last one, depending on the length of the replies. Do digital resource exchange platforms work at all, given the needs for confidentiality? Are there solid conclusions here? Any views from the panelists?
I can take those questions. I have in the research that we've done, we've studied enormous amount of variety of digital resource exchange platforms. The conclusions I can share today from the work and research that I've done is ones that are managed by neutral third parties are the most successful. This is not to say that there isn't a room in the market for other types, but this is again where we bring policy into it, where regional territorial policy supports knowledge resource exchange platforms, that it builds into the trust factor of having a trustworthy neutral intermediary between the two B2B, for example, in resource sharing. This is ideally based on policy that is publicly supported and therefore provides that confidentiality as a part of the service model. But it also means that you have to have the uptake and you have to have industry leaning towards a public model rather than the different private actors for knowledge resource exchanges. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, many thanks. I'm afraid, although I see there are further questions, but I'm afraid we need to close this session very soon. But at least, and I want to thank all the panelists, and it shows this debate, which is certainly not closed, shows that there is a need for further discussions regarding these tech transfer and IPR issues. So there is certainly food for thought for a further workshop, maybe in the coming months. And if I can make a very concrete suggestion, of course, to be discussed by the stakeholders concerned, if the IP issues relating to these circularity hubs are so specific as I can see, maybe this would be a good justification to start developing a sort of model consortium agreement. That would be a starting point, not a one-size-fits-all, but a starting point to define more precise IPR arrangements that would, of course, come on top of any arrangements defined, for example, in the model grant agreements for the framework program, or that would come on top of any other contract that would apply in specific circumstances. But okay, this is just an idea to be discussed between you. And now, again, with my thanks to the panelists and to the audience, I'm afraid I need to give the floor back to the organizers. Thank you very much.
Dennis, and I'm afraid to take it back because this was a very rich debate. Your suggestion, but also thinking about third persons, neutral parties. So I think there was actually really new ideas coming up, which we felt are important. And definitely we will follow up because you know that we have also an agenda in mind on knowledge valorization, IPR management and research, maybe a communication coming up. So we'll definitely follow up with those who are interested on this. But as you said, at a certain time, let's move to standards and waste, the next panel discussion now. So thanks a lot to all the speakers and to you, Dennis, that you helped us. Very good.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, a rich debate. I'm happy now to hand over to Hans-Christian Eberl, who learned last minute he has to step in. Hans-Christian, good to see you. You are replacing Pavel Misika, but well, I think you're well known in the circular economy world as well. You're in the circular economy unit. You worked on the circular economy already in the parliament. I just learned you have not only a PhD in chemistry, also a history. So you are the competent moderator on standards and waste regulation, already mentioned. And over to you, please kick it off. Thank you, Hans-Christian, for stepping in.
Thank you, Jürgen. Do you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, perfect. Then there's one thing that I have to get straight now, because you said I have a PhD in history. I don't. I have an undergraduate degree in history, so not that this will be used against me. So I'm an imposter.
Good to know next time.
Okay. No, but I will cut this short because we are already lagging a few minutes behind. I think it's an honor because I'm hosting an extremely interesting panel here. We have 4 speakers, and the title is Waste Regulation and Standardization, but I think we will move from waste towards circularity, so to a more integrated approach towards material streams. First speaker will be Natalia Alandete, who is part of the Circular Economy Development and Transition team at the EIT Climate Kick. and she works with all sorts of stakeholders across all sectors. In her role as an innovation portfolio orchestrator, I read this and I was I am extremely curious. I hope she will explain that role in her presentation. She will present her analysis of the standardization framework in Europe. Second speaker will be Enrique Garcia, an old colleague at DG Environment, policy officer working on the chemicals product waste interface and on the implementation of the second Circular Economy Action Plan. And he will talk about the broader CE policy context. Our third speaker will be Christopher Spiliotopoulos, who will speak on regulation and standardization in the context of eco-design. And he's working as a project officer at the GRC in beautiful Sevilla, where he focuses on product policy and product design. And fourth speaker, Rachel Lombardo, will present Circlean, which is a new industrial symbiosis initiative, and she's the director of the business development for International Synergies Limited, and she's an expert, obviously, in industrial symbiosis, and the company is also the creator of NISP. And if you don't know what this is, I don't know it either, but I'm sure she will explain it in her presentation. So, and with this, that was already 2 minutes instead of 1. I will give the floor to Natalia Alandete for her presentation.
Hans, thank you very much. Please let me know if you can see my screen. I'm trying to share now.
Not yet. We can see you now. The screen. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel and to the audience for joining us during this event. First, I would like to define what is a standard, so we all start on the same page. According to the European Committee for Standardization, a standard is a technical document designed to be used as a rule, guideline, or definition. It is a consensus-built, repeatable way of doing something. Standards are created by bringing together all interested parties, such as manufacturers, consumers, and regulators, of a particular material, product, process, or service. All parties benefit from standardization through increased product safety and quality, as well as lower transaction costs and prices. Furthermore, standardization has been also identified by Horizon 2020 as an innovation support measure, as this facilitates the fast and easy transfer of knowledge at low cost and creates a path to improve the competitiveness of the European industry. To understand better the standardization framework in Europe, a report about this was written as part of the Scalar project, which was mentioned previously by my colleague Fiona Howie. And this project aims to increase the uptake of industrial symbiosis and resource efficiency in the process industry across Europe. It is worth mentioning that the research done for this report was based on the analysis of a compilation of published standards in the levers of production systems, such as the efficient use of materials and energy, reuse and recycle of waste streams, digital transformation technologies that include artificial intelligence, technology 5G or big data, and sustainable finance instruments like the green bonds. The analysis revealed that the current pan-European standardization framework for circular economy that embeds industrial symbiosis is still lacking a comprehensive and cost-effective scheme that addresses and delivers a circular value chain to the products placed on the European market. But where are these conclusions coming from? So after compiling the list of standards according to the 3 lenses mentioned before, the production systems, digital transformation technologies, and sustainable finance instruments, the collection of standards were mapped based on the phases in the life cycle of a product, resulting in a diagram like the one displayed. Through the analysis of such information, some gaps were identified. For example, most standards do not address roles, responsibilities, interactions, and logistics among stakeholders in the value chain of a product. If we look at the sector level of the process industry, Most of these standards are focused on the chemical sector, with a substantial attention on plastics, while less reference to the sectors of electronics, paper, cement, non-ferrous metals, minerals, water, ceramics, and steel. Moreover, there is a minority of standards that are applicable to all these sectors. If we continue zooming out, the analysis also reveals that 85% of the overall standards have an impact on the firm or industry level and very little impact on the national, European, or global level, as well as in eco-industrial parks. Moving one layer above, about half of the standards compiled are defined at the national level, but not yet adopted by the European Standard Organization since an elect. Therefore, the standardization frame is not uniformly implemented across the European member states, leading to potential duplicates, overlaps, or inconsistencies, creating barriers to the internal market, discouraging investments and limiting the marketing of innovative products. On the other hand, the current standardization framework does not approach a robust system thinking, as is demanded by ambitious legislative strategies such as the European Green Deal. So to shape a more comprehensive, cost-effective, and holistic standardization framework, and one that is based on a system thinking approach, the next recommendations were suggested in the Scalar project report. For the production systems category, it is recommended to introduce new standards that harmonize vocabulary and approach the concept of circular economy, create standards that stimulate industrial symbiosis and promote a supply chain focus applicable across sectors, design standards that set up adequate technical conditions to use secondary materials and byproducts, also incorporate new standards that strengthen extended producer responsibility for the design of circular and sustainable products. In terms of technology, of digital transformation technologies, it is suggested to integrate and harmonize metrics to control the performance and impact of circular economy practices, develop standards that enable smart manufacturing, and establish platforms to exchange data and information. And last but not least, in terms of sustainable finance instruments, the creation of a bond market is required that enables the transition towards a low carbon transformation. So I have included in all the last slides some references to other standards that already exist globally. So by considering the recommendations suggested to the European regulatory and standardization bodies, the standardization framework might transform from this mapping, the original and current one, to one that looks more like that one, and which leads to transformations on how industries and value chains operate, helps industries to move towards adopting the principle of Industry 4.0 based on automation and data exchange, and provide financial instruments that fit the risk of profile of green initiatives, eliminating persisting barriers and encouraging investments that support endeavors and industrial symbiosis. So for more information on the Scalar project and the reports that have been developed, you can explore the website, whose link is now shared in this screen. So thank you very much all for your attention. And I pass over to you, Hans.
Thank you, Natalia. That was extremely interesting. I do have a few questions already. I will have to check the chat whether there are more, but we will deal with that later. I will hand the mic over to Enrique Garcia. I don't see him yet on the list, but I'm sure he's there and waiting. Perfect.
Yeah. Hello, Hans Christian, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me and perhaps see me. So I will try to use my 5 minutes to the best of my capacities. Allow me to share my screen, or will let me see. I will share my screen, and no, you will do it for me. Perfect. Well then, first next slide, please. Okay, so I am going to give a very quick and high-level overview of some policy aspects which I believe are relevant to the discussion today and to the very interesting workshop that is being hosted. And of course, the first reflection has to do with how diffuse and how blurry the borders between products and waste are becoming in the new policy context. So obviously, you're all aware of the publication some time ago of the communication on the interface between chemicals, products, and waste. And of course, we want to make the most of materials so that they stay for as long as possible in the economy, and we are able to then put back into good use the waste that we produce. Now, all of this has to be seen in the context of the current European Green Deal objectives, of course, climatic, by the protection of biodiversity, the whole circular economy, and the upcoming zero pollution action plan, and which in the context of the circular economy and the use of materials basically translates into waste prevention, ensuring that the materials we re-inject back into the economy are safe and as toxic-free as possible. Of course, that at the same time we ensure the enhanced reuse and recycling of these materials, and that we do this at the same time trying to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which is the objective which we need to achieve our climatic objectives. Next slide, please. So there are many interesting things happening around in policy in environmental terms, and which affect elements that we are speaking about today. I do not have time in these 5 minutes to go through them, so I basically will not attempt it, but I will just highlight a few which stem from the Green Deal. And that is, of course, a circular economy action plan with its many strands, the chemical strategy for sustainability, which links to the circular economy action plan and to zero pollution and to many other aspects, and to others which I have highlighted here in red, and which have a sort of common thread which links recovered materials and this ambition to put back into the economy as much as possible with the concern or with addressing safety and fitness for purpose of those materials. And the common thread in all of them has to do with the chemical content and legacy substances, which we sometimes, I would say even often, find in materials that we are trying to recycle from waste, and which, of course, and I've heard some comments throughout these sessions, aspects such as end of waste, usability of materials, and having to have a good knowledge of the wastes which are produced or the byproducts which are produced by one actor before it can be decided whether they can be used for the other actor is essential. So all those aspects linked to fitness for purpose and safety associated to chemicals is a recurring issue that we have to deal with. And a number of legislative policies and legislative proposals under preparation deal with this. Next, please. So that is dealt with under some of the chapters of the Circular Economy Action Plan, where we want to enhance circularity in a toxic-free environment and at the same time create a well-functioning EU market for secondary raw materials. There are a number of initiatives that stemmed from the interface communication. We will now be working on a project linking to methodologies to minimize the presence of substances of concern in recycled materials, and this will be looking more at the technical aspects of sorting and decontamination of different waste streams. Of course, the chemical strategy for sustainability is dealing with many of the conclusions and threats as regards chemicals in recovered materials that come from the interface discussion. And one of the most requested and debated aspects in recent years, and which again, its analysis stems from the interface communication, has to do with end of waste and byproduct criteria, which have been widely called for by many sectors, and on which the Commission was not active for a number of years, and which we intend, if we find suitable candidates, to work further in the coming years as well. Next, please. So we did, in preparation for this work and stemming from the interface communication of 2018, a study on good practices on byproduct and end of waste criteria, basically trying to understand what is going on in the different member states, who has done what for what material streams, be it byproduct criteria or end of waste criteria, which are the most relevant, and how does the actual legal instruments look like, and also what has been the level of success of some of them. This study was published in May 2020, and the link is in the presentation, which I understand will be followed, will be shared later. Next, please. And of course, as a follow-up of that and commitments we have in the list of actions in the Circular Economy Action Plan, we are currently working on scoping around end of waste. I will tell you about that in a minute, but maybe to just create the link between the subject of this session and of course end of waste and byproduct criteria. Of course, deriving legal end of waste or byproduct criteria is not as such standardization, but it is a way of ensuring a common approach and defining some common elements in terms of quality of the input material, of the output material, and establishing the legal clarity on the use of a material, which is of course something much sought for in the context of industrial symbiosis, so that you can ensure that material leaving one place can be received at the other in full compliance with legal and practical considerations. And in deriving end of waste criteria, we have often looked, because it is normal and it is one of the criteria under Article 6 of the Waste Framework Directive, at what are those specifications needed for the specific uses to which the material is intended. And their standards, when they exist, obviously have a role to play. And we have taken elements of standards, or at least referred to some in some criteria, both at the EU and at the national level. And here I am just listing a few. For example, recent Italian and Spanish end of waste criteria for paper, for example, refer to EN 643, which relates to paper. And of course, there is common reference to standards also in relation to sampling and analysis associated to these materials. Next, please. So I think this is my last slide, and just to tell you what's coming on this area of end of waste and potentially also byproduct criteria. As you know, something's changed in the Waste Framework Directive when it was amended in 2018. There's a stronger obligation on member states to ensure that materials that fulfill the conditions will be granted end of waste or byproduct status. So this is to say there is work for the Commission, and we intend to do so for selected streams, but there's also a lot of work which makes much more sense to be done at the national level, and therefore there is a lot of work for all to be done. We are currently scoping material streams. We held a stakeholder survey last year, and until beginning of this one, we are still doing the analysis of a lot of what came from that, and we intend to hold a workshop together with the JRC, either in Q2 or perhaps most likely in Q3 of 2021, so pretty soon. And with that, and if we find suitable candidates in terms of volumes and relevance, and where we feel that taking action at the EU level really makes sense in promoting circularity for those material streams, we will propose further work to the JRC to develop a number of specific end of waste criteria for relevant streams. And this is, of course, as it has been in the past, work that is likely to take a couple of extra years. But you will be hearing more on the priority streams towards the end of this year. I think that's the last one. So thank you very much. And the floor is back to the organizer. Thank you.
Enrique, thank you. I know the struggle. Policy overview cannot be done in 5 minutes, but you tried nonetheless. I think it was 7 or 8. So, but it was thorough and it was absolutely necessary, in my opinion. So let's just go to the next presentation. Christophoros will dig deeper into the scientific aspects of product policy with a specific focus on eco-design. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks to Hans Christian for the excellent pronunciation of my name as well. I was wondering if I could be helped with perfect, excellent. Can you see the presentation? Well, excellent. So, good afternoon from beautiful Sevilla. My name is Chris Pilotopoulos, and I work for the Joint Research Center, and more specifically, the Product Bureau in the Circular Economy unit of the JRC. So if we move to the next slide, you will see that our main role is to provide technical support to European environmental product policies, which include the Eco-Design Directive, the regulations under the Energy Labeling Regulation, the EU Eco-Label, and the Green Public Procurement. Now, the first point I want to make here, and especially for those who recognize some of these schemes, is that this is not obviously directly waste legislation. It is rather product legislation, and more specifically product design legislation, but bearing in mind that 80% of the environmental impacts of a product are determined at the design stage, it's easy to understand the relevance, and also in the context of the industrial symbiosis discussion we're having today. The second point I wanted to make is that there's the scope of these policies and this framework is quite wide. So we cover products from imagine household appliances to consumer electronics, but some industrial products as well, such as let's say electric motors or power transformers. But again, ideas and principles that could be adopted could provide some inspiration for your sector on the industrial symbiosis area. So in the next slide, I will mention the gap that we've been having in the eco-design world and the product design world when it comes to having common definitions and common assessment methods for these products on what constitutes a circular product, what constitutes a material efficient product, what makes it durable, what makes it repairable, what makes it recyclable. So in the absence of these common methodologies and common principles, the European Commission mandated the European standardization bodies, so CEN and CENELEC, to develop those with a mandate called 543 in 2015. And this is a process that JRC colleagues of mine participated in. And moving to the next slide. So we've asked them, and so they did, and out came a series of standards, which is called EN 4555 and then X from 0 to 9, which were published in 2019 and 2020, and deal with exactly the aspects related to material efficiency that I mentioned earlier. So an assessment of durability, an assessment of the ability to repair, reuse, and upgrade, recycle, but also some more general aspects on how to communicate these material efficiency aspects to various audiences, from consumers to other businesses to policymakers. These standards were developed in Technical Committee 10 of CEN and CENELEC, yeah, in working groups 1 to working group 6, and again, JRC colleagues had a major contribution there. In the next slide. Thank you. So obviously we don't have time to go into depth in all these standards, but just to give you an example of the recyclability standard, so the 45555 one. So first, there is an end-of-life treatment scenario described, all the steps from depollution to sorting to metal extraction, etc. And then the standard continues with setting the criteria that I mentioned, which are affecting the assessment of recyclability. So basically the ability to identify parts of a product that contain certain substances and components that shall be removed during depollution, the ability to access and remove those parts that need special treatment, and the ability to undo joints, which then makes let's say the dismantling of a given product more easy or more difficult, and therefore the recyclability. So just to give you an example of what the content of these standards is, but similar criteria and definitions were provided for, let's say, repair or reuse aspects. The next slide, please. So probably one point I failed to mention earlier is that these standards that will develop, this series of standards, are generic, they're horizontal, they're not product specific. So even though they were developed in the context of the eco-design framework and the energy related product scope, we try to put together common criteria and common methodologies that could be applicable to a wide range of products. But as you can understand, there's different aspects that affect the recyclability in different types of products. So the same things that make a television recyclable are not the same as what makes a washing machine recyclable or an industrial product recyclable. So colleagues of mine, again, in parallel to the development of the standards and also since, have developed a number of studies, have published a number of studies which take the common principles of these standards, expanding them and trying to transpose them into product specific considerations in mind. So again, this could provide inspiration for you in the industrial symbiosis sector on how these principles could be relevant for you. I think that was it. Try to be as brief as possible. Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to any discussions later on or further. Thank you.
Mike is on again. Excellent presentation again, and I have to tell you that I'm a big fan of your team. I've read several of the reports that you mentioned on the last slide. And yes, I like that quantification approach. I know how difficult it is, but I think that's the way forward. With this, I will give the floor to Rachel, our fourth speaker. I don't see Rachel Lombardi on the list. Can anyone enlighten me? What happened to our fourth speaker?
She's connected and the micro is on. Yeah.
Name was unfortunately not in the latest program, or at least for which I apologize, but I hope she's there.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, where are you? Rachel? Or can she not?
Well, if we lost the speaker, then we should use the time. We still have, I would say, like 10 to 15 minutes and take questions already.
Yep.
Would you agree?
Yes. Let's go ahead. I hope we are getting questions.
I hope we are getting questions. The questions that I see in the chat are still for the session that we had before. But in the meantime, I think people are still digesting all the information, and probably question will come. I mean, I can start. I have questions for everyone almost. No, I have questions for everyone. And if we start with the first presentation, if I may, Natalia, you had a whole series of recommendations and you grouped them nicely. You had recommendations for EPR, for data exchange, for design, more general for bond market transformation. Could you prioritize your recommendations? Is the one that is the most urgent and the most important that we should get implemented first, or is that a naive question?
Yeah, well, Hans, what I could say is that I think there are a couple of standards that already exist but are not applied at the pan-European level. These two standards are the one defined or created by AFNOR, that is on circular economy, that is for circular economy project management system. So these standards basically focus on planning, evaluation, and implementation of projects on circular economy. And there is another very important and relevant standard that is the one designed and already published by the British Standard Institute, BSI, that is on the principles of the circular economy in organizations. So as its name says, or it states it, it's about how the organizations can transit or transform to become more circular through their operations. So these two particular and very relevant and linked standards exist already there. So it will be very recommended to the standardization bodies in Europe, Sense and Elect, to review these and to adapt them to the pan-European context. I would also like to add maybe some additional relevant information that there are some technical committees and expert groups at ISO and the European Commission that are already working on circular economy and sustainable finance, also the green bond standard. So by this year, some of these teams will create and come up with new standards. So it will be also very valuable to keep an eye and track on what is coming, that will come soon. So this can be also well adapted, be adapted to the European context.
Well, I'd say that's very clear, that's very specific, and that's something that can be done relatively quick. I mean, in standardization and legislation terms, nothing is really fast, but nonetheless, I think that's a clear advice for interventions. And as you focus on standardization, I just saw that we had a question on standardization coming in. And that is on end of waste criteria. So that's probably more for Enrique. It's more a statement than a question. It says the end of waste criteria an important element in circular economy and investor confidence. Talking about PHA, bioplastics example, produced from wastewater streams and organic waste as a feedstock. I think the question behind it is about discrimination against materials and about possible negative impacts of the waste status on the management of a material flow. And I remember we discussed these things already 10 years ago when I still was in DG Environment. So I would even ask Enrique, so what is the future for end of waste criteria? Do you see a potential that end of waste criteria can contribute to the transition to circularity, and is there a huge potential, and would that be for some very specific material streams? Could you specify this?
Well, yes, we do believe there is potential, and that's reflected in the Circular Economy Action Plan, where we commit to develop some. And I think certainly many stakeholders believe there is potential, because over the years, and recently during, for example, the consultations that we did for the interface communication, both in its preparation and after it was published, and in many other consultations and events ever since then, we received many comments and requests, both for end of waste and also byproduct criteria, which maybe even in the context of industrial symbiosis might even have a greater impact of things which are not waste and not recognized as waste, but require byproduct recognition in a way. So we do believe it has some scope. We also do believe that at least for the ones that will be developed at the European level, we must be very sure that they will have an impact, because there are hundreds of potentially interested material and waste streams. Some of them have very specific or local regional circumstances, or simply because of their nature are not moved very far from one place to another. And there certainly the intervention of the Union probably makes less sense. I mean, we do know from past experience that it is a long and complex process to develop end of waste criteria, which are published as regulations under the Waste Framework Directive. we are also aware that there are other ways of doing end of waste. And there I would draw your attention. I've seen mention to some materials derived from the treatment of wastewater, for example. And there, for some biomaterials and materials obtained from wastewater treatment, for example, under the new fertilizing products regulation under Article 19, there is a way of obtaining end of waste recognition via compliance with technical criteria in Annex 2 thereof. So all of this is to say, yes, it is important, and probably if we want to cover sufficient material streams to make an impact, we have to recognize that the work has to be shared between things which we do at EU level, things which are done at the national level, even regional maybe sometimes if that is possible, at in the member state legislation, and things which are done via other legislation. For example, what's happening now under the fertilizing products regulation. Thank you.
I think that's a good point, and I think that also leads us to a question that I just saw in the chat, and that is definitely for you or for this group. Question: to what degree is wastewater recovery included in the upcoming circular standards? And then the author says, from my own experiences, this is where the categorization gaps are highest and barriers for industrial symbiosis highest, but still the attention seems less. So yes, I would say the coherence and even convergence between already chemicals, waste products is a key issue, but then also material streams, solid material streams, and water. The common perspective and the coherence, that's a big issue. So someone wants to answer this?
Maybe I can try from my side. I don't know how much I can say about the recovery of the water itself, but certainly I tried to address it already in my previous intervention. In terms of recovery of some materials from wastewater treatment, some of these I know have been addressed, or at least there are studies done by JRC, and they are linked to work that has been done. For example, under the fertilizing product legislation, for example, on some salts, ammonium salts recovered from water, and the well-known projects around struvite, for example, where that is work in terms that on materials recovered from water that can be dealt with under the fertilizing products regulation, and I think that is very much advanced. And other things could happen in the future. I know there is further work ongoing on relevant streams. And as far as material streams that we would be dealing with directly, let's say via the usual route within the Waste Framework Directive, it is a bit too early to say anything about possible scopes that we might prioritize. Yeah. But they are certainly an important set of materials. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, I just saw that Rachel is back with us. She had technical problems. I mean, I think it would be a shame if we would just skip her presentation. So if we still have the 5 minutes and maybe a very short round of questions afterwards, then I will give the floor to her. Maybe it works now.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Apologies for that. I was in the meeting all morning with no problem, and then as soon as I started to share video. So very briefly then, a mention about circling with regard to waste regulation and standardization. I work with international synergies. We literally travel the globe, now virtually, enabling facilitated industrial symbiosis in the NIST model, to Hans' question before. So we've got a bit of experience under our belt with industrial symbiosis. The Circling project came about through the Circular Economy Action Plan. It is a DG GROW funded initiative in response to the 2018 report done for DG GROW, which clarified the challenges with developing a common metric, a common methodology for measuring the impact of industrial symbiosis. So while we can signpost tens, if not hundreds, of industrial symbiosis projects in Europe, we have been unable to deliver a single consistent metric for the impact to one of the questions that we saw in the chat before about KPIs. So the Circular Economy Action Plan established the need for this common methodology, and Circling is the answer to that. So specifically around the motivating framework, which we've heard about from our colleagues already today about the sometimes conflict of interest and lack of clear business case. To, in particular for this session, then the lack of standardized evidence base on industrial symbiosis. So again, Circling was established to elaborate a common approach and promote the uptake by industry. So the first task for Circling is to establish the network itself, which incorporates industry, business associations, research, and public authorities. Then to provide a tool, self-assessment, matchmaking, and reporting database available to all in the European Union. An ISL Zone Synergy platform is a basis for that. I mentioned that in the chat because somebody asked whether there was evidence of these things proceeding. We'd like to think we've been around long enough to say, yes, there has been. After the tool is well defined and made available, then we come on to the reporting and developing that common approach for reporting impacts, where there has been a tension between wanting a complete, very thorough, bordering almost on LCA kind of approach to reporting on one hand, and the other hand saying this has to be something that's accessible and doable by SMEs on a regular basis if we want them to be picked up. So that's the current debate going on within the project consortium, and with a task force who is helping us bring some experience from outside the consortium onto this particular topic. And then finally, Circling is intended to establish a label to reward involvement in the first case and then performance in the second. So we say involvement first because we cannot guarantee a synergy for a company that's seeking one. So there's talk about rewarding both involvement and the performance. And of course, the label is intended to help promote the uptake by industry. And then finally, this is my last slide, so I think we're well under your 5 minutes. I put this one in with Dominique's permission, not because it goes to regulation and standards, but because it's a direct from business, in this case, Arla Foods Dairy Company, direct from business testimonial presented at the G7 Alliance for Resource Efficiency Workshop on Industrial Symbiosis that says that, yes, we definitely need that facilitation. So as these activities are moving forward, if we could just, again, keep in mind, and it has come up a number of times, I know I'm a bit preaching to the choir, but that state-sponsored facilitation and in some cases seeding has been critical. So again, my apologies for the awkward intervention due to, I have no idea what technical gremlin, but thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing now.
Well, thank you. This was extremely interesting. It's a pity that we don't have time for additional questions anymore. I would wonder whether you have you also have policy recommendations from the things that you really see in the field. But I think that is something for
no,
longer discussion. If you want to answer in like 40 seconds.
Yeah, very short. I think it's what's already been mentioned, I think, by Enrique. The clarification on byproduct and end of waste is one of the most important issues as companies look for an opportunity. They can be very risk averse, and if there's clarity on, okay, it's not illegal, then that's a big help. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was our session. We are 13 minutes behind, so I'm sure Jürgen wants me to close it. It was extremely interesting. I would love to discuss with all of you a little longer, but I think thank you, and give the floor to Jürgen again.
Yeah, Hans Christian and dear speakers, it was great to follow all these presentations. They're very rich. You see how much food for thought we are getting here today, and how much follow-up we need actually to give. For me, this was really a great session, and good to hear your voice, Rachel. Finally, we know us for some time now. Nevertheless, I think we have still 2 sessions ahead of us, and one is about access to energy and resources in hubs for circularity. I'm happy to hand over to William Neal, who is our colleague from DG Environment, an advisor on circular economy, a colleague we are happy to work with. So over to you, and many thanks, Hans Christian, that you steered this in such a nice way and still on time. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Over to you, William. Thank you.
Thanks, Jürgen, and thanks, Hans Christian, as well. All of these discussions are so interesting, like you say. So I'll try to get straight to business as time is ticking. And in this session, we're really looking at material and energy access, and material and energy efficiency is really logical and beneficial from so many perspectives, but it's very hard to achieve. It really doesn't happen on its own, unfortunately. Already we don't actually know so much about the stocks and flows of materials and energy, let alone identifying their potential, the potential if they're shared or if they're optimized. And getting to there really depends on systems and on people, on identifying common interests across diverse public and private groups, on networking and brokering. Now, I'm just a civil servant, so I know my limits, but fortunately, you don't have to hear me. We have 3 experts lined up. Between them, they have several decades of experience in doing just that, in making those systems work and building those bridges. Just to introduce them briefly, we'll hear first from Ignacio Calleja, who coordinates the circular economy actions across 6 of our knowledge and innovation communities. So he brings together his own home in the EIT for raw materials with the EITs for climate, digital, food, manufacturing and urban mobility. And he started off as an organic and environmental chemist, but has been involved, including within the Commission, in knowledge management and policy development for circular economy for many years. And I think he has an initiative under his belt for just about every material on Earth. Then we'll hear from Lisbeth Runders, who heads up the Secretariat of the Kalundborg Symbiosis project in Denmark. She has many years of experience in connecting up those public and private companies and actors across various different sectors. And she has been working for Kalundborg, which we all know is really a reference point for anybody interested in symbiosis, since 2012. And finally, we'll hear from Georgios Chalkias, who's the Senior Project and Innovation Manager at IRIS Technology Solutions, and he coordinates the European Incubus project. He's applied his industrial ecology and environmental management background to developing circular economy and Industry 4.0 and industrial symbiosis projects for 10 years. So as we only have 5 minutes for each of you, and I want to leave plenty of time for discussion, I'll invite Ignacio to link up and tell us about what the knowledge and innovation communities are doing to overcome some of those barriers to material and energy efficiency. Ignacio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, William. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay. I don't know whether I have to use my own presentation. I was told that, okay, perfect. Thank you. So, yeah, my name is Ignacio Calleja. I am Senior Advisor for Circular Economy at EIT Raw Materials. My presentation will be focused not in the activities of the CrossKit group, but in the activities of EIT Raw Materials, specifically dealing with industrial symbiosis. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just very briefly, EIT Raw Materials is one of the 8 existing knowledge and innovation communities supported by the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. At this moment, EIT Raw Materials is composed by more than 300 partners, and I would say that around more than 180 of those partners are SMEs. We also have large companies, we have RTOs, and we have innovation in, universities in our partnerships. We have partners from more than 22 countries. Headquarters of EIT Raw Materials is located in Berlin. but we also have 6 innovation hubs around Europe, plus other 8 regional innovation centers also located in different regional areas in Europe. And I think that we have a new one, which is not included in this map just now, which is also located in Sevilla. As you know, the main purpose or the main objective of EIT Raw Materials is to promote innovation and entrepreneurship regarding raw materials in Europe. Next slide, please. So the main purpose or the main objective of EIT Raw Materials and the vision is to develop raw materials into a major strength in Europe. So just now, everybody is talking about circular economy, everybody is talking about the energy transition, and everybody is talking about digitalization, but if we don't have the right supply of raw materials for all these aspects, we will not get it. So one of the aims of EIT Raw Materials is to secure the sustainable supply of raw materials, both from the primary site and from the secondary site. So the provision of secondary raw materials is an absolutely a priority for EIT Raw Materials. And when we talk about secondary raw materials, we cover the whole range of activities to ensure the right supply of this secondary raw material. So from the design stage of products, so how to include circularity aspects in the design stage of products, through the right use of these resources in production and manufacturing, the right collection, dismantling, sorting, recycling, and valorization of these waste. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I told you before, one of the main priorities of EIT Raw Materials is to support innovation and entrepreneurship regarding raw materials in Europe. So you know that in EIT Raw Materials, we have our own calls for innovation projects. We don't deal with research projects in the KIC. Minimum TRL in our calls to have proposals approved is TRL 5. Okay, so we support ideas moving from TRL 5 to TRL 7. And in the case of industrial symbiosis or industrial waste valorization, we already have a very relevant number of projects in our portfolio. So we have from specific projects dealing with phosphorus recovery and valorization. We also have projects supporting the development and the creation of services for industrial symbiosis. It's not only the support for new technologies or new techniques, it's also the way to support how to deal and how to allow industrial symbiosis to be implemented in Europe. We also have a couple of international projects, for example, dealing with the collaboration between Europe and China in industrial symbiosis. We also have project dealing with infrastructure related to industrial symbiosis implementation. And we, of course, we have projects specifically dealing with the demonstration of new innovation solutions regarding valorization and symbiosis of waste from the mining side. For example, tailings. We have projects making collaboration between mining companies or construction and or managed development producers. And we also have a large number of projects dealing with industrial symbiosis and valorization in the non-ferrous metal sectors. I also have to make a remark here that we are also dealing with education. And we have a relevant number of education projects supporting industrial symbiosis concept. So we need students including this concept of circularity and symbiosis in the CVs and knowledge. Next slide, please. Very quick, just the last one. Thank you. So the regular exchange of ideas and comments and discussions with all those projects allow us to have an idea about what are the main considerations to be considered to allow real implementation of industrial symbiosis in Europe. And one of the main comments from this project is the lack of high quality information. So just now is for some of the companies, it's difficult to trust in the information available. So if I need this kind of raw material to be supplied from a secondary site, we need real and high quality information to trust that this supply could be useful in my production process. Then we have a number of market barriers making industrial symbiosis difficult to be implemented. There is a very different landfilling cost around Europe and around different regions in Europe. In some cases, it's also very difficult to see the real economic benefits of industrial symbiosis. And it's also difficult to have secondary products or secondary materials in the market competing with primary. It's clear that we also have further support for innovation and technological development. Is for some of industrial waste, we already have a very well technological development, and we have already available efficient industrial solutions in the market. But for other type of waste and industrial symbiosis collaboration is not so clear. We need to further support this innovation and research support. Another important comment from our partners is always the regulatory options. We need, it would be really helpful to have a regulation harmonization in Europe regarding waste criteria, or byproduct criteria, or net of waste criteria. And at the same time, it would be also very interesting to have an harmonized reporting methodology for industrial symbiosis in Europe. And finally, the geographical scope is also an interesting aspect. I think we have many comments commenting that the regional approach would be, the regional or the local approach would be the most efficient way to deal with industrial symbiosis. We could have the most efficient collaboration at local or regional level, because when we talk for industrial symbiosis, it's not only waste valorization. We also talk about water and energy. And when we talk about water and energy, it's much more efficient to talk about this collaboration at local or regional level. Thank you. I think.
Thanks, Ignacio. Yeah, it's a bit more than 5 minutes, but we'll catch it up. So you mentioned the importance of quality of information and some of the market barriers, and I'm sure that we will hear those also from Lisbeth. Maybe moving more from the sort of TRL 7 level to the everyday delivery of services which she's involved in. Now, Elizabeth, you're operating in a specific geographical area in Kalundborg municipality, but there you have hundreds of companies and thousands of population and a wide variety of activities. So how do you actually get that information flowing across those groups, and how do you get them to innovate and to coordinate to realize those common interests? Elizabeth, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Very good.
Thank you.
Hearing you loud and clear.
And I think somebody is going to help me share my slides. And thank you very much for having the opportunity to present some of the experiences from Kalundborg. This is my first slide, just to make sure that everybody knows Kalundborg Symbiosis, I hope, but if there's one or two of you who doesn't, this is the chance to tap in. And I'm very happy to be part of this conference, and also to learn about the use of the SRL that I was involved in developing together with Klaus Sommer a couple of years ago, when we did this report on industrial symbiosis and whether it could be an efficient tool towards circular economy. So it's very nice to hear that it's been widely used and adapted into the work of industrial symbiosis. Next slide, please. This is the map over Kalundborg Symbiosis, and we've been in the business long before there were webinars on circular economy, basically since the early 1970s. And we've just been attracting a new member to our small private association, Christian Hansen, who's a very profitable and ambitious green company in the biochemical business, and they have been settling in Kalundborg. Also, speaking of industrial symbiosis, this network of opportunities regarding local resources, tapping into it as a value proposition. So should anybody be in doubt that it's attractive for a local community to have an industrial symbiosis, I think they can tell a different story, actually pointing out that this is a value proposition for them to tap into. Next slide, please. This is our ecosystem, just as it looks today. We have 20 different streams of exchanges in these three categories, energy, water, and materials. And I'm just going to talk a bit more about the energy and material side, since this was the focus on this session. Next slide, please. In the past 10 years, we've been working very hard on securing the green transition on energy in the cluster, so that it should be possible for all our members actually to get a supply of green energy. It was not the case 10 years ago, where we had a coal-fired power plant supplying steam to the district heating system, but also to the local companies. We had a conversion on that power station. Last year it was 100% conducted. So we're very proud today that we have green steam available for all companies in the cluster, and it's an integrated energy system, also using renewable sources like electricity from windmills combined with the heat pump. And the heat pump is another green energy solution that we have in the symbiosis, using the warm wastewater from industry and turn it into district heating for the city of Kalundborg. The heat pump is supplying 30% of the district heating to the city of Kalundborg, so it actually plays a big role in the total ecosystem of green energy. And I think today we had a very interesting discussing also about reversing supply and demand driven innovation of symbiosis. And I think the third element in our green transition on energy is actually generated in a demand-driven way. We had a resource in the industrial cluster, namely the fermentation slurry from Novozymes and Novo Nordisk, being a perfect commodity for a biogas producer. And then they formed this new company in a co-financed the start up of the new plant. And now it's up and running and providing local companies with natural gas upgraded from this biogas production. So I think it's a good showcase of circular economy, that you can actually take the slurry, the waste from fermentation industry, turn it into biogas, upgrade it to a local grid and supply local companies with this source. Right now we are running a project on how to plan a central industrial cooling system for the companies to tap into, so that they can actually save their own cooling towers and tap into this mutual infrastructure of cooling, basically pointing out a lot of energy to be saved in the future if we can make that system attractive for the companies to actually tap into. Will you tap again? Please. Thank you. One of the challenges that we look into, having focused such on the green energy transition on energy, is that we want to do something about the 800,000 megawatt hours of excess heat that we have in the industrial cluster, could that actually be used for a purpose instead of we are using now energy to cool this stream down? We have enough excess heat to heat 45,000 houses, and we don't have that many houses in Kalundborg, so we need to export it out of the municipality, out of our own geography. And how could a system like that be designed? Could we make a genuine urban industrial symbiosis, for instance, by transporting this excess heat all the way to Copenhagen, 100 kilometers away? Could that be attractive? And right now I must be honest, we are facing a problem in a post-decarbonized area, like the one that we have in Kalundborg with the green transition of energy, since we already harvested the carbon dioxide emission once, and we can't do it again. So there's no obvious and really good business case for this industrial urban industrial symbiosis to be invested in. So there's a challenge for the good business case when we look into this new area in our experience. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you another example of how we work in Kalundborg Symbiosis when we are having these new results of the transition. Before we had a very nice resource stream from the power station, where we could actually take the limestone and use it as an industrial gypsum resource at the plasterboard producer just next to the power station. So that was a very good example of how a residue could be turned into a commodity between neighbors. But that stopped with the conversion, since there's no such residue from the biomass-fired power station any longer. But we've been working closely with a university student actually to point out a new potential for this industrial stream that we wanted to provide the plasterboard producer with as a substitute for the terminated stream. And right now we are testing a fraction from a nearby incineration plant to see if that is attractive for us. And this is just one example of how big data and artificial intelligence is used in this design of new projects for us. And we are going to look much deeper into that in the future to get more digital and see and have a look into those opportunities that are not one-to-one obvious for us, but needs a little more elaboration in the future. So next slide.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for the word.
So I'm hoping that you're going to wrap up now.
It's okay. I'm done by now. Just stating out that system make it possible, but we need people to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And sorry to rush you through, but we are going quite a bit over. So I'll move straight on to Georgios. Now, Georgios, your project Incubus is deploying 5 energy symbiosis incubators across Europe, and one of them is actually in my hometown where I was born and grew up. That's Hull in the north of England, which I think still counts as being in Europe. As far as I'm concerned, it does in any case. I think common to all of those incubators is bringing again together public and private and civil society actors. So tell us what lessons you can draw from that experience so far. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, William. I'm wondering if I can share the presentation from my computer, because I've made a couple of minor updates.
Frank, can you help?
So let me see if sharing is activated.
Normally, yes, you could.
Okay. I think now you can see my the PowerPoint, right? Or Is that okay?
We can see it. We can see it. All clear.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll just jump straight to the point. I have an introduction for myself and the company. I'm sorry? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Working.
Okay,
Yep,
great. So just an introduction for myself and the company. I'm working from ICE Technology Solutions. We're an advanced engineering company specializing on key technologies for the digital transformation. To be more precise, we're working with portable and inline sensors for a variety of industries, mostly spectroscopic solutions, and we couple this with our expertise on digital platforms and digital analytics for integrating and analyzing all the useful data retrieved from industries and processes. In this context, we are also the coordinators of Incubis project. Incubis is a project started a year ago, and as you can see from the title, we are putting in place an industrial symbiosis incubator with the aim of maximizing the exploitation of waste heat in industrial parks and districts. I think one interesting thing that relates to what we do with the previous discussion is that we actually target organizations that are very good candidates for being symbiosis facilitators, and we aim to support them and build their capacity in actually delivering successfully energy symbiosis projects. I have to highlight here that we are focused primarily on symbiosis that involves energy exchanges. And well, we do that mostly online through a virtual incubator model, which focuses on the delivery of knowledge-intensive business services, which we combine with an ecosystem of ICT tools that we develop and/or that our partners already have. These tools combine different things, like, for example, what we discussed before, like matchmaking, but also other types of assessment of the waste energy potential. As you can see here very briefly in the map, we are active in 5 regions where we build case studies, one of which, as William mentioned before, is the Humber region, where the city of Hull is in the center of this region. And actually, this is a consortium as well on the right. I don't want to tire you too much because I'm not going to discuss the project today. What I actually did is I went to our partners from Incubis and I asked for success stories, nice examples of established symbiotic relationships, synergies, if you will. Some are related to energy, others are not. I will present to you very briefly 3 of them, together with some success factors for each of them, and a lesson drawn, and I'll try to be very brief. So I will start from Spain, and this is an example of our partner Symbiosis, where we have in the province of Girona in Catalonia. Here I'm based in Barcelona, so in Catalonia where I'm based, we have the city of Girona, where what happened is that there was the municipality of Girona, or the municipality of Olot, to be precise. They had the possibility to valorize forest residues from the area. So, waste that remains after you do the cleanup of your forest. And combine this with solar energy and geothermal energy to produce heat, both high and low temperature heat, cold, and electricity through a tri-generation plant installed in the area. Now, it's interesting here because, really the only waste valorized here is forest waste. Sun and geothermal energy couldn't be considered as waste necessarily, but without the combination of the 3, this wouldn't be possible. And we have obviously the municipality here featuring in the center of this symbiosis, putting in place the generation plant as well as the heating and cooling network, which was done in collaboration with Naturgy and Vatia as energy service providers. And maybe one interesting detail to highlight here is that in order for this to work, the ownership model adopted is something called temporary union of enterprises, which many of you might not know because it's something that is quite specific in Spain and allows temporary alliances to be set up without having, let's say, a stronger kind of like integration between the two business entities. Now, what were the success factors that made this project happen? And this was a project, I think, that was close to 2 million. Well, first, it was the location, because in the city where it happened, we had the coexistence of a strong sustainable energy cluster. So you had the expertise locally, the geothermal potential and the solar potential were there, of course, combined with the forest biomass. So the supply has to always be there, but not only the supply of the resources, the supply of the expertise is very important as well. Then political determination was a very strong factor here, because the city council, obviously, which owned the land and buildings where this was installed, and also, of course, was responsible for the collection of the forest residue, had to be to play a key role here. But also another aspect that is important and was mentioned in the presentations before, the civil participation, the social acceptance. You can see on the bottom right here a picture where the machines of the tri-generation plant were installed in the ground floor of a building, and they are visible from the street. So there was a kind of like campaign, and also they tried this way to like make the innovation visible to the people of the town and create a sense of ownership over that. So, you know, I think the lesson learned from this case study is that the interaction of public, private, and civil society is really a central element for many types of industrial symbiosis. And moving to the next example, we're moving to Norway, and this is an example provided to us by ADE Cluster, our partners in the Incubus project.
Rogers, I have to deter you in a little bit because I want to make sure we have some time for discussion. And,
sure. Okay, I'll be quick. I'll be quick. So what we have here is a synergy of excess heat, and we have a maybe unique collaboration between a silicon-manganese smelter, which produces the excess heat, obviously, and an onshore fish farm that produces turbo fish. I don't know how to pronounce it. And this was the original, I would say, receiver, and then later on 5 more companies joined. Very quickly, the success factors, again, location, we can see it's very important. The personal relations between the management, top management of the 2 original participants, and also the progressive deployment. So as I said, first there was the network set up with the fish farm, and then many years later, actually, as you can see, it was expanded to 5 more companies in the region. And just to wrap this up, is only one more example. It's quite different, actually. So from carpets, from carpet waste to highway sound barriers. So, I think this is a very nice and unique example, because here we have not simply the introduction of industrial symbiosis, but the establishment of a new company that actually it was a collaboration of 4 different companies, sorry, of 3 different companies, each of which had expertise, complementary expertise, but also complementarities in their access to the market. And what they did, they took residues from a producer of carpets for cars, for automotive industry, and with that they constructed the acoustic panels for the street, so for the highway, so sound barriers, which were very cheap, because the raw material costed €1 per ton, as you can see here, since it was a waste, right? And it made the whole endeavor very profitable and at the same time environmentally friendly. And the lesson here, obviously, is that business factors like access to and knowledge of the target market are essential for making industrial symbiosis work. So that's maybe refers a bit on the pull elements that we discussed before. And with this, I will wrap up. Sorry for taking too much time, William. and you can
Thanks,
contact
Runders.
me in.
You were exactly 10 minutes, so.
Okay.
But I have a question for you. I see that already some of our panelists have been answering questions in the chat, which is great. I think that's a very efficient use of time. But I wanted to ask you, because you're working across different regions, different countries, and in the last session we saw Rachel was presenting circling, and I just wondered, is it how do you think? Actually, I wanted rather to ask about how you inventorize materials for a region, because there are many different ways you could do it. There's the sort of statistical ways. I love Sankey diagrams, and I've seen regional Sankey diagrams, analysis and modeling. You can also just go and tread the corridors. You can knock on the doors. You can talk to the individual companies and organizations.
Yeah.
Increasingly, you can use AI, you can use tracking and tracing technologies and so on. So how do you go about, and how do the different examples that you're involved in go about actually initially identifying and inventorizing those materials, whether they're carpets from cars or whatever?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, honestly, all available methods are being used, and it has to be a case-by-case approach. But in general, it's always a stepwise approach. And in general, you try to start from sources that are, well, either publicly available or anyway have. When I say publicly available, I don't mean necessarily in the internet, but data that are not confidential, let's say. And usually you will get this data from some public authority or a similar organization. And a second step would be identifying these companies that would be more interested on the concept or have better relations maybe with the public authority or the project manager, the industrial symbiosis project manager, and then start with them by interviews and so on. Sometimes you will also receive some Excel sheets with analytical data. Other times you will just get information through interviews. And then you can move, once you build a starting point, you can move by collecting more data with various ways. So this can be from experts, in some processes, you can have a very good estimation of what is being used without having access to the original data. You can also do some research online and elsewhere. So, and also I have to say that data mining from the internet is being used increasingly. Especially when you have to kind of like identify what is the industrial activity of different companies, what they do in their different sites and so on.
So it's really a combination of all those.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned actually this temporary union of enterprises, and I wanted to ask Elizabeth a little bit on something related, because I see that it's all about partnerships. It's all about bringing the people together to make it happen, which you've been doing in Colombo. But I wondered how that actually works in practice in terms of what kind of protocols are you establishing? I mean, do you have this sort of temporary union of enterprises or similar? How do you get to the agreement, and how do you frame the agreement to make sure that the materials are available to the right people in the right place at the right time in Colombo, Lisbeth?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question. Sometimes I would like the answer as well on that, because I think as a facilitator we are not invited into that room. If you picture the barometer, it's some of those levels that are actually sort of exclusively taken by the companies themselves. So I think for a facilitator it's important to make sure that capacity is built on those issues within the companies. Some of the earlier speakers said that you must not overdo it as a facilitator, and I very much agree. You have to leave these kind of things, the commercial, the legal things, things that are covered with confidentiality, to the companies themselves, and then have a sort of a waiting position for you to take over when the agreements are finally made. Because I think as a facilitator, you cannot have enough knowledge on all these different kinds of materials and energy sources, things like that. So you must leave that to the involved companies and trust them to have the right capacity. So I think as a facilitator, you should make sure that everybody in the companies is brainwashed with industrial symbiosis to such an extent that they can't stop thinking about how they could actually reach out for partners.
You have to build it into their thinking. And then just finally, and in 1 minute, Ignacio, because I wanted actually to remind you of what was said in the last session by Rachel on circling, because you've been working across several countries, and I wondered, is there a need for developing those common methodologies and metrics? Would that be useful? I mean, a lot of the, you're dealing with a lot of cutting edge symbiosis projects, but I guess a lot of them are quite developed. They're developed according to local context. Is it useful to sort of develop those metrics that can be used across regions and across countries? And just 1 minute, please, Ignacio, because we need to get back on track.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree. I think that, and to be honest with you, I think that the Circling tool could be, I never say perfect, but I would say almost perfect solution, because the main purpose of Circling is to have everybody with knowledge in industrial symbiosis together. We have so many initiatives just now in Europe around industrial symbiosis that we have knowledge everywhere. But it would be great to concentrate on that knowledge. And it would be great to have an harmonized methodology to report about industrial symbiosis. We don't have this report methodology. And one of the aims of Circling is to have this harmonized methodology. So for me, it would be absolutely a great success. Yeah.
So it's not about harmonizing the approach of a hub, it's really just having a common underlying methodology. Well, thanks to all of the contributors today. I think it's been a fascinating program. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops in the future. I'd have liked to have been able to talk for very much longer, but I'll hand back to Jürgen, and maybe if there are any more questions coming up through the chat, our three experts can try to directly respond to those. So thank you to all three of you. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor to host such a great discussion, such interesting examples. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you to all colleagues. That was, again, a very rich debate. And sorry, that's always me who looks a bit impatient. But now I think I would like to come to the last panel, which is about investment. So Shiva, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me and you see me?
I hear you and I see you, and I'm very glad. So let's look now in terms of investments. It's a good day that you join us, because I just heard on EU taxonomy the Commission went public today. Okay. So I think we know you because you're the head of division for innovation finance advisory for the EIB. Lots of experience, not only on Green Deal, but in terms of investments. Over to you. I take the liberty to say, and sorry for this, time is money. We extend the workshop by 10 minutes so that we have also time for this, including my concluding remarks. Yeah, so over to you. Yeah.
Okay, but feel free to give me hints if you see that we are going overboard. Now, I know it's always difficult to be moderating the last panel of a long day and such an exciting day like today. But everyone, please wake up because, or stay awake, because we are talking about money. And without money, as they say, the world will not go around. So I'm sure also the circularity hubs will require more investment, more money than we would we would have at our disposal. So therefore, please do join me in welcoming a really exciting panel. I will keep the introductions very short because we want to go straight into the presentations, and also hopefully have a few minutes for some very interactive discussion. Because of the way we are running a bit late, we will have changed a bit the order. I will first ask Miriam Boveda from DG Regio to briefly present in 5 minutes her views. And then we go back to Céline Rotier from the EIB, to Dr. Michael Brunkamp from the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, and finally to Una McNerney, the CEO of IRIS. So the floor is yours, Miriam. And the time is ticking. 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much. I hope you're able to be on video.
Thank you a lot, Shiva. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
I had a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe Natalie, you can share it with the audience, please.
Can you share it?
I will.
Miriam, please feel free to start, and I hope the presentation will soon show up.
Yes, so I want shortly to introduce how cohesion policy can support circularity hubs. And first, I would like to say that we have a very strong declaration from Commission President von der Leyen, and she indicates that cohesion policy investments will play a major role in the transition, and our investment will be screened through the lens of the European Green Deal objectives. And this is a major issue for our next programming period. My head of unit, Peter Berkowitz, indicated this morning a more strategic approach for how we see synergies with the hubs. And so I will give you more specific information on how we see our investments in the future. Next slide, please. So we are investing in place-based innovation and smart economic transformation. We will deploy technological and social innovation at a large scale, and I think this is very relevant also for what you are doing, and that we can have at our disposal a project pipeline that we can support, and for which we can support the large-scale deployment with our funds. Just to recall that we expect around 100 billion euros to be mobilized through cohesion policy on sustainable growth investment. Next slide, please. So there, I would like to underline two major issues. We are expecting in the programming, so we have a strategic programming which is the basis for our funding. We want that a strong link between innovation and deployment is reflected in the program, and we want to have a transformational change instead of marginal efficiency gains. And for that, DG Regio has developed a toolkit for managing authorities, because you know that our funds are managed through shared management. And so we want to make sure that this change and these transitions are taking place and are anchored in our program. Next slide, please. So we have a specific objective which is particularly relevant for the hubs, which is the objective to invest in a green, low carbon transitioning economy towards a zero net carbon economy and resilient Europe. We put the emphasis, and the bulk of our investment goes to the less developed regions, which are there in dark orange. Next slide, please. And so what is our priority for funding under the specific objective? So the 7 main priorities for funding are listed here, and they are completely relevant for the type of project that you contemplate. In particular, promote circular economy and SMEs, support for upper stage of the waste hierarchy. But we are also investing in the modernization of and upgrade of existing recycling and waste treatment infrastructure. Also in the introduction of smart technologies to improve resource efficiency, to improve the knowledge base, and also, of course, in capacity building for all stakeholders. Next slide. And I would like to share, to finish with my presentation, 2 examples of projects that we have supported. One on blue circular economy, which aimed at turning waste fishing gear into business opportunities. And there we invested more than 1 billion euros. Next slide. And another example of project is the project to develop a cooperative structure of design centers and companies to help SMEs minimize the environmental impact of their products. So with these 2 examples, I will end my presentation. Thanks a lot for your attention. And I'm looking forward to questions.
So thank you very much, Miriam, Miriam, for your presentation. And let me just make sure my camera goes on here. Yes. Let's perhaps now move to Céline Rottier, and maybe as part of the introduction of Céline, who works in our sort of team, in the lending team that sort of deals with thematic impact finance. I just briefly maybe just refer to the fact that the European Investment Bank, of course, is really excited about this new launch of the hubs for circularity. It's been a circular economy has been something we have been looking at from very closely together with the European Commission RTD since 2014, always with the lens of how can we better support circular economy, both from a financing but also advisory perspective. So I think what this is now, this initiative is really the whole next generation of game-changing, sort of creating a game-changing, I guess, dynamic, and hence it's great to have our lending colleagues and Céline sort of present how we have and what type of instruments we have put in place to actually support such projects as they sort of go through the commercial demonstration phase, and then have follow-on financing from the various financial products that the EIB has at their disposal. So without any further ado, Céline, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've also prepared a couple of slides. I'm not sure, my camera doesn't seem to work though.
We see the slides, and
my camera is black, so I apologize for that, but I don't know what I can do to change
but we hear you, so please go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm presenting the activities of the thematic impact finance team at the bank, and as by Shiva, this is an instrument that addresses the needs of the innovative companies in Europe. And when you have reached a certain stage in your innovation phase, you have done the testing of your pilot, there comes a moment where it's time to reach commercialization, put out the first manufacturing plant, put out the first unit of your innovation. And what happens then, and we see this across different sectors, is that these innovators face challenges. The technology has not been proven, or they have a new product and the market has not been established. And as a consequence of that, it can be difficult to find private investors to finance that. This is typically referred to as the Valley of Death, and it occurs between the TRL 6 and 8. And this is what happens is because of the lack of private investment, some of this innovation gets delayed in its deployment, and that's a pity, especially if this is an area of importance in terms of policy. Could I have the next slide, please? So the bank has designed, together with the European Commission, a program that can break this cycle. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to finance commercial flagship projects that can demonstrate that a new technology works, that can support with the establishment of a new market, and really prepare the pathway for the commercialization of these technologies that will be part of our future. We started doing this initially in the energy sector. The tool worked well, and we decided to expand it to mobility. And more recently, we've expanded this to the circular economy. We see that there's a lot of appetite in this sector because it is new. There are challenges, both on the input side and on the offtake side. There are uncertainties in the market there. So could I have the next slide, please? So which are the companies that we can really support? It sounds nice, but what do you need to do if you want to get support from the EIB under this type of program? We will look at the project. Ideally, it should be located in an EU member state or another country that is eligible under the mandate. The project should show significant risk. It should be a high-risk project, either in terms of technology or in terms of market risk. It should show sufficient innovation to justify that, potentially also in the business model. We expect the project to be commercial, and that means also being able to demonstrate that you will generate sufficient revenue. So you have to have a credible business plan that is sound. We would also ask you to have sufficient skin in the game yourself, in the sense that you have credible investors on board who are willing to take the dive with you. And typically that goes hand in hand with a management that we believe will be capable to lead this innovation towards successful commercialization. Next slide, please. Why do we get approached by this type of project? As explained, there is a gap in the market. Taking the first dive can be too risky for private investors. The bank is willing to take a higher risk. And we also offer some other advantages in the sense that we don't require any board seats, so we're not dilutive. We also provide thorough due diligence thanks to our engineers that are part of our team. That also creates confidence for other investors. So we see that if the EIB gets on board of these innovative projects, often other private sector investors are willing to join and take the next step. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, what is the process? Companies that apply for the bank have to take three different steps. First of all, since this is a program that has been established together with the European Commission, we will decide together with the approval of the Commission whether the project can be eligible under this program. And if that is confirmed, we can start the bank's due diligence process, where we first ask approval from our management to see whether we get the approval to conduct due diligence. And if that is successful, we can proceed to the signature. The tool of this thematic impact finance, as said, has been deployed also for other thematics, not only for circular economy. And our signatures are well above 300 million euros as of today. And we look forward to seeing what interesting projects this will bring in the circular economy space. That was it, Shiva.
Thank you very much, Celine. Indeed, so I think this is a great financing tool that that can certainly give some initial catalytic support to projects, and which then can access other financing in either parallel or follow-on financing. Perhaps maybe a quick plug to also say that the EIB provides also both technical and financial advisory support. So many of the projects that actually end up in Celine's shop have had some benefit of that advisory support to sort of prepare them for that due diligence experience. So that's great. Now we come to another really great initiative, and it's my immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Brandkamp, the co-founder of the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, a really fascinating initiative that has come out also of the joint collaboration of the EIB and the European Commission, RTD. It was a recommendation from a bioeconomy report back in 2017, I believe, that actually put this idea out that Europe needs to have such a blended financing instrument. And it's a real pleasure to have Michael join us and tell us about it. Michael, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shiva. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure and honor for me to share some insight about getting. That's the last slide, actually. Please do the first one.
Yes, we'll give you.
It's a great pleasure to share some insight about how to scale up companies in the bioeconomy sector, and I think most of them might be at home in the circularity clusters as well. Well, the European Commission, jointly together with the European Investment Bank and supported by Innofin, thank you, Shiva, put the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund in place to address the growth funding gap in Europe. And we are very happy that we think that we are at the right time now to do the investments and to find great investment opportunities as well. Next slide, please. And that's actually because of 3 reasons. I think we all share that we have great consumer awareness and a changing consumer demand in this industry. I think this is the most important driver for the transformation process from a fossil-based linear economy to a bio-based circular one. But we also see very impressively actually today the great support from different kind of public institutions, all the regional networks, and so many activities pushed from the public side, and even the regulatory framework might improve. In addition, we have great innovation in place to have great technologies to make change. But of course, there's still a lack of growth funding. And I'm very much in line with Celine's slide, as you can see on the next slide, please. We are addressing this valley of death. So the companies have their technology more or less ready, but they need to fuel and to fuel their growth and to become really a pan-European player to make really a difference. And that's what we are addressing. Why is it so important, or why is it so demanding to invest in these kind of companies? Next slide, please. The main reason is that it is very, very complex. These companies are facing a lot of demands and a lot of topics at the same time. So they need to make sure that they have a feedstock in place. They often have very complex R&D on products and processes at the same time. These production process has to be in place. They need to organize the whole story, sometimes great logistics, and they even have uncertainties facing them. So in the regulatory framework, and also in the dynamics. Sorry for the light. Also in the markets, because the market is very dynamic, which is great, but it's also uncertain that you don't know exactly how the customers will behave. So this is so complex that usually the teams do not have the right skills in place to execute this. And of course, then you have too less investors to support them. But we are here, next slide, please. And we would like to address this topic. And we want to invest in around 20 to 25 companies. And they're located in Europe. So these are the European Union countries and also the associated countries according to the Horizon 2020 list So these includes Norway, countries like Switzerland, Eastern European countries, Turkey and Israel as well. I think next to the money, most important is expertise. So we need to have expertise. So we want to even to support other investors, because it's always a game of trust. So you need to have expertise to the table so that you can invite other investors to follow. So then you can really syndicate with other investors to get things on a large level. And the companies we are looking at need to have a clear impact and a very clear alignment with the so-called environmental, social, and good governance criteria. All the other stuff is more or less standardized. We are a market-driven, privately owned fund, which is shown here. Next slide, please. Where we are now. So we have done our second closing already. We have 9 different investors from 5 different European countries on board. Of course, the most important cornerstone investor is European Investment Bank, but we're also very proud to have 4 corporates, 1 insurance company, 2 family offices, and another national promotional bank on board. The final closing will be done within this year with a volume of 250 million then. We have done already our first 3 investments. The first one is located in Germany. They deal with lupines, and they produce vegan yogurts, vegan ice cream, or vegan cheese out of these kind of lupines, which is far much better than soy. And now they want, that you can buy these stuff all across Germany as already. And now we want to expand to other countries. The Bee Pioneers are located in the Netherlands. They valorize actually orange peels, which is not waste because this is a high value side product. And they are located in Belgium. They work on new microbiomes to decrease chemical fertilizer, to substitute it, and to substitute fungicides from the chemical side as well. Next slide, please. We think next to the money, expertise is also very important. So we set up a team which is really distributed all across Europe, as you can see here. For instance, Jovita, she's from Poland. Janne is located in Helsinki. Stefan, located in Lyon, France. Peter in the Netherlands. And so we are, and Vivek in Switzerland. So we are very distributed, and we bring different knowledge together. And we would like to learn more about exciting projects, really to make sure that we can contribute to close the funding gap. Thank you very much, Shiva.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I think we're all waiting eagerly for more variety of vegan yogurt and cheese and so on. So please hurry up and make sure these products come to market soon. The world needs them. So
you can already buy them.
So without any further ado, it's my real pleasure to introduce you to Una McNervy. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. CEO of Iris. And Una, I saw you, and I hope that we will also see your slides, right? So the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks a million.
Maybe I should say that you are an digital transformation enthusiast, and really sort of hopefully will inspire us on what the digital transformation can unleash for the circular.
Okay, so thanks very much for that. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this panel. I do realize I'm the last participant, and I will try to stick to the time constraints. I will just, my name is Una McNerney. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Iris. Next slide, please. Because my colleague Jorgos, who spoke in the earlier session, introduced the company, I will skip on from here. And I'll go straight in to the area. So next slide, Frank. So I'll go straight into the thematic that I wanted to focus on today, and very much in line with the other speakers in our panel, this whole challenge of the funding gap and how we can ensure that we get from project right into the market. So next slide, Frank. And I think because the Horizon Europe project would cover about up to 20% of the total costs of the hub, and because when you think around the type of investments that are involved here, so first of a kind lighthouse demonstrator plants of near commercial size, then we know we're dealing with high investments here, capital intensive, because we're talking about new value chains. There's multiple actors involved, so these can be quite complex projects for future investment. And then there's the whole issue around the timeframes and how long it's going to take these projects to get to break even and to get into a growth phase. So we could categorize the hubs for circularity as future high risk and non-bankable investments if we look out into the conventional VC ecosystem. And I think it was really, really interesting for me, for example, to listen to Michael there talk about the European Circularity Bioeconomy Fund, because I think there are options out there. I think one of the key things is going to be visibility and some centralized, possibly some centralized sources of future funding opportunities and how that future funding mix might look for projects going forward. So next slide, Frank. Thanks very much. So now just a few reflections and maybe a bit of good practice. So I think when we this morning in the opening session this morning, I think it was a good message that we're not really dealing with projects anymore. We're dealing with big, ambitious initiatives, and we really are shifting from an R&D type mindset. Of course, there's R&D involved, but we're moving into a real entrepreneurial mindset. And when we talk about future fundraising, it is very much with an entrepreneurial spirit that we need to be approaching this. So I think possibly to map out the full to-market journey of these hubs, what's involved, what's the potential totality of the ask. So what's that 100%, if you will, of which our current project with Horizon Europe will fund 20%. I think this is the kind of vision that we need to have when we start out with our hubs for circularity. How much is it going to cost to get to market deployability? And then it could be good to actually factor some tasks into these Horizon Europe projects, whereby we are looking at our investor readiness, we're looking at business planning, the formulation of our ask and the return on investment for future funding, our future funders, sorry. Who is the promoter team? And I think this is really important when we're talking about collaborative type environments and value chain actors. There must be a very strong promoter team that's asking for the future funding. And then we have the whole issue of preparing decks and making that outreach to investors. And I think that should happen actually during our Horizon Europe project, as opposed to at the end of it, that we start looking for the post-project funding. Next slide, Frank, and I'll accelerate here. Okay, so we've heard from the European Investment Bank, and I think it's just noteworthy now that I will talk about a program that's specifically designed for SMEs, and it's the European Commission with the support of the European Investment Bank, offering a blended finance option to SMEs. And I've also mentioned here now recently mid-caps as well, whereby SMEs can access the grant they need to get from TRL 6 to TRL 8, so to get out of that valley of death that we just saw from the other speakers. And then there's the equity option, whereby we can get equity up to tickets of 15 million per project to take the projects into the market and reach break even. And it's designed, this program, to pick up those high risk, high win projects that currently are considered non-bankable in term by the, let's say, the conventional VC community, because they are high risk. And just to say that there is a call specific for the Green Deal within the EIC Accelerator. So it could be a very interesting option for SMEs and mid-caps who are involved in the hubs for circularity. And now I'll just leave you, sorry, Frank, next slide. And now I'll just leave you with a nice example, a really lovely project from a startup from Italy called Toma Paint. I think the interesting thing about this project, it was born in FP7, in a collaborative project in FP7. It was also scaled up to a pilot plant in Horizon Europe. And then, let's say, the key actors behind this project set up the Toma Paint startup, to look towards how they could accelerate from the pilot plant to an industrial scale and go into the market. And they've levered the EIC accelerator program to do this. It's the valorization of tomato waste for the production of cutin, which is then used as a bioresin. And the first application is going to be in a coating for the interior of food cans. Next slide, Frank.
Una, can I just ask you to start wrapping up? I'm really sorry, but I don't know how strict Jürgen will be with us. But perhaps maybe just 30 seconds or 1 minute.
Super. So just to say that they got just over 2 million in grant funding to go from TRL 6 to 8 and to scale up the plant from pilot to industrial scale, and then 1 million in equity funding to do those first market deployment activities and to bring the business to break even. So next slide, Frank, and I think I can actually wrap up now by just leaving you with some thoughts here. Maybe there's even probably no point in leaving these thoughts. I think we can just leave the time now for questions. So I can hand you back a few seconds there. But I think it's just the entrepreneurial mindset that's needed. The starting early in the funding journey, in that future funding journey, that becomes, let's say, by design in our projects. And I think there's lessons can be taken from the EIC accelerator, and I think especially in the actual business acceleration services that accelerator also gives to the entrepreneurs, not just money, but also smart money, and supporting them with additional mentorship and coaching and other services. I'll leave it there. Sorry, Shiva.
No problem. You've done an amazing job in wrapping up so much into few minutes. Now, Jürgen, do we have a few more minutes, or is this a hard stop for us? You tell me.
5 minutes.
No, 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm tough. Time is money.
Thank you. You're tough, but hey, any minute is precious. Well, I would like, and I think this is in fact, Una, you have already maybe addressed my question. So I first maybe start with the others. What would be your recommendation to the European Commission, to the wider community here, of what are the do's and don'ts right now for this initiative of the Hubs for Circularity, to ensure that it has the best chance of actually becoming a game changer, the way Peter Droll had outlined it this morning. So maybe starting with, who would like to go first? Celine, do you want to share a few ideas?
Yeah, well, I think for some entrepreneurs, it can be sometimes difficult to differentiate between all the instruments. I think creating clarity about what is available and who can do what. I think, for example, EIB can do tickets from 7.5 million up to the biggest ticket we've done, 75 million. It would be really large. But I mean, making clear what everybody can do is important, and also the focus areas, I think. Otherwise, it can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so the clarity, division of roles, and perhaps a good understanding of who is best placed to do what, this information gap, indeed. Michael, what's your wish list?
Yeah, my main recommendation is that the clusters and the hubs should regard themselves as part of the ecosystem. They need to connect with investors. They need to invite others to cooperate. These are maybe large corporate startups, and not just to be maybe a hub, which is great, but I think they need to become a great part of the ecosystem, which has to be developed intensively.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, I don't know whether Miriam is still there, because she had indeed another engagement at 4. So perhaps I turn it back to Una, maybe. Any further thoughts? Oh, you're there, Miriam.
Yeah.
Perfect. Please go ahead. Any recommendations?
For us, it's very important, and we think that the hub can take a very strong role in accelerating the transition. So for us, what is key is that information on the hubs is shared with the managing authorities of the programs we are supporting, and that they can show that they are part of this transformation. So for us, this partnership with the managing authorities and sharing information and clarity on what they can do for improving the transformation, and I think this is the key messages. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Miriam. I think we keep getting this point of information, clarity, and perhaps Una, can technology help us to get that clarity?
Okay, well, I think there's two different things really. I think just maybe one reflection more from my side, and based on my experience, and not so much from the technology side, but certainly from seeing the huge challenge that it is for an SME to get that future funding, is to get to investor readiness requires a skill set that many SMEs don't have. So I think the coaching, the availability of coaching, the availability of support for SMEs to get into that kind of fundraising mindset that does have a lot of singularities, and it requires a lot of business planning, a lot of ability to project forward into the future and to really analyze the market and make estimates as to what you think that market opportunity for it is, how you can quantify it, and essentially how you can show metrics to investors. And I think this becomes one of the big challenges. And I think this is, for example, where the EIC fund, the EIC accelerator steps in, is when a company doesn't have metrics and everything is based on assumptions, somebody has to take the risk of let's say increasing the TRLs of those close to market, or accelerating the TRL levels of those close to market projects, and helping those companies on the first market deployment of their projects. And I think more of that type of funding is needed, and more support for SMEs to be ready to pitch for that type of funding. And I come at it from the SME perspective because we are an SME, and it's a world that I would know. I would have quite familiar the challenges of it. Sorry for the long answer.
Well, no, excellent reflections. And Jürgen, all I can say is, you know, if you had a few more minutes, you would have gotten even more insights, but we are very grateful for the extension we got. And I would like to thank the panelists for an excellent set of presentations and a lot of good food for thought at the end of the day. So back to Jürgen and the engine room.
Okay, Shiva, many thanks, and sorry for my constant impatience, but many thanks to all the speakers. We took carefully notes. There was actually lots of insights you were sharing, each of you, with us. Yeah, let me come to my concluding remarks, and they are threefold. It's about thank you, it's about a two for tango, and it's a nice surprise where you should support us all at the end. The thank you, first of all, goes, I think we had a very rich debate. I don't want to say that I'm exhausted, but we got many, many insights today, much more than we expected. So a big thank you to the moderators, to the speakers who shared this with us. And we had many participants. And of course, all this information will be made available also on our website. And we would really like to follow up and come back even with an email address to all interested here. The two for tango. It takes two for tango. Who's the first? Who's the second? I don't know. But let's start with the first side. This is what's the European level. This is the Commission. These are the member states. This is the European Investment Bank. And the other side are actually the stakeholders, the industries, the regions, the society. And let me start a bit with the European side, because the session today, I think, clarified quite a lot what is our role. We are not a circularity hub. We can support when it comes in terms of funding. And here we heard in particular clarity of the funding tools, but also to give a stability for the funding. We are now at the beginning of the 7-year period for the multi-annual financial framework, supporting Horizon Europe, supporting cohesion funds. We can help when this issue comes to issues like IPR, the framework conditions, and we got interesting remarks today. We can help when it comes to waste regulations and these priority streams to which our colleague in DG Environment was referring to. We can help in general on standards to frame this. We can help on reporting. We heard the Circularity project. And of course, we can help also on knowledge sharing our speaker after the lunch break, when it comes to projects like EPOS, Scalar, Iris, and you got lots of the insights. That's the one side. Now, how to make a tango out of it? The tango is very much about where are now the private side, the industry. You hear here today lots of commitment from the private side representing Processes for Planet. And there will be a memorandum of understanding which we will sign on both sides. This will happen during the Research Innovation Days end of June. That's one important step. But we also need now the regions, the society. So my plea is also, I hope that this event helped also many regions a bit to make up their mind how to engage. Because I think the benefits from this idea of a circularity hubs are hopefully, after this day, obvious. So we are actually interested to get help with the colleagues from DG Regio to get contacted from industrial stakeholders, but also from regions to say, well, we would like to learn more. Because I think, as our last speaker was saying, we should not just limit ourselves to projects. We should get something moving where projects actually drive us to a real transformation. And the time span is ideal. We are starting a 7-year period of stability when it comes to funding. We have a next important decade under 2030 with the Fit for 55 goal ahead of us. So let's make it happen. So 2 for Tango. And that's our invitation also to stakeholders to come back to us, to the Commission. And we will inform you in writing about this. We will certainly, and if there's an interest of regions also to have follow-up workshops at a smaller scale, we're very much available for this. That's my second point. My last point, that's a little surprise. We have Frank, Natalie, Dominique. I deviate from my rule. Could you open up your cameras? Where are they? Hi, Frank. We heard your voice. Hi, Natalie. Hi, Dominique.
Hello.
Dominique, where are you with us, Dominique?
Hello. Yes, I am there.
Okay. I think we should, although we are not together, clap our hands, and a big thank you to the 3 who made this workshop really happen. Yeah, I think this is a particular thanks. Thanks a lot.
Thank
All
you.
the best.
Thank
we
you.
open up our microphones. Thanks a lot. Have a good day. And we come back to you, and please come also back to us. Many thanks. It was a great day for all of us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.